Luray, huh? Those are some pretty good towns in there. We could do some business in there.
Well, it won't matter much. We're out of Bibles anyway.
What do you mean we're out of Bibles? Why didn't you tell me we're out of Bibles?
You look in the box too, don't you?
Oh, you've got an excuse for everything.
Because you blame me for everything.
If we were running out of Bibles, you should have told me we were running out of Bibles.
Well, we're running out of Bibles.
Well, then we'll get new ones.
Then let's get some new ones.
We can pick some up in Great Bend.
Great Bend's the other way.
Well, we've got to have Bibles, don't we? Let's see now. We can veer down to Lucas. Then we can veer down to Wilson. Then we're off to Lorraine and Bushton.
We could veer off to Hoisington.
We'll just have to keep on veering, that's all. I'm getting hungry. You hungry?
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to Your Pick, a film podcast. I'm Tatum.
And I'm Geneva.
We are two friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week, we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking, as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. We are back again, everybody. Hello, Geneva.
Hello, Tatum.
Why don't you get us started off? Have you been watching anything fun this week?
Yeah, I've actually been watching quite a bit this week. So I was just telling Tatum off mic, I finally saw for the first time Bonnie and Clyde from 1967. So this is the last film that I had not seen in the famous 1968 Best Picture Oscars that are kind of... There's a book by Mark Harris called Pictures at a Revolution that kind of argues that this particular year was sort of the advent of the new Hollywood, because it was this kind of really interesting mix of very classic filmmaking that was going out of style and new filmmaking that was very revolutionary. And Bonnie and Clyde is in the top of the list of these really exciting, new, very controversial styles of filmmaking that were coming into play at that time. So it is the story of Bonnie and Clyde, the famous, I guess, bank robbing couple from the 1930s, Great Depression era. Definitely watching Paper Moon kind of gave me similar vibes because it's a similar setting. But it is a really fascinating watch to see now with the distance of time, because I went into it knowing that it was very controversial for the time, for how frank it is about sex and how much violence there is. Watching it, I was kind of like, well, this is a lot more tame than I would have expected. But that's just because, I'm watching it from the eyes of 2023. I can see why it was so controversial at the time. And I think what's so remarkable, like what was one of the things, the reason that people were kind of outraged about it at the time, is that it is very frank about this sort of, what's the word? Sort of teenage ennui. You get the sense that Bonnie and Clyde start this crime spree because they are two sort of disaffected youths who don't care about anything and they just want adventure, and they have no sense of morality. They have no sense of obligation to other people or right or wrong. They want excitement. They want fame. They want glamour. They want something else in their lives. And it's a very relatable feeling, but I think it's something that had not really been, that was kind of only just starting to be depicted on screen in such a sort of value neutral way. Anyway, it's a great movie. It still holds up today. The acting is really incredible. And yeah, it's just a really interesting sort of picture of these new trends in Hollywood at that time, that kind of late 60s era. Let me see, what else did I watch? Like I said, I watched quite a few things. I rewatched some old favorites. I rewatched What's Up, Doc, also by Peter Bogdanovich, which I'll probably bring up.
Did you do that on purpose?
No, actually, I was watching with some friends, but it lined up really well. Rewatched Rio Bravo, which is a favorite of mine. And
I feel like you just watched that.
No, I haven't seen it.
Didn't you just watch that like a few weeks ago or something?
No, I haven't seen it in
We were
quite a while.
talking about doing that on the podcast. That's what. Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
Yes, it had been several years since I had seen it, and I was afraid it wouldn't hold up, but you know what? It really did. I really love that movie. So at some point, not right away because I just rewatched it, but at some point we'll probably do an episode on it.
Yeah.
And then I watched a couple of classic musicals that I had never seen. So I saw Oliver! Exclamation point from 1968, which is a musical adaptation of Oliver Twist. And then I saw Yankee Doodle Dandy from 1942, which is a musical biopic of George M. Cohan, who's kind of a Broadway legend from the turn of the century. Both movies pretty good. I was like, okay, I'm glad I saw them. I don't know if I'll rewatch them again necessarily. They're not super what I love about musicals when I watch musicals, and I'm a huge fan of musicals, but I am very glad I saw them because they are two classics. So anyway, that was my week. What about you, Tatum?
Yeah, I haven't been watching that much. Similar to, I think, what I said last episode, I've still continued doing a lot of writing and reading in my free time. But as far as a few things, I've really only watched two things, I feel like, this week. Well, I've been rewatching Community and Schitt's Creek, just kind of shows to put on that make me laugh and smile while I'm doing other stuff. But in terms of actually sitting down and engaging with stuff, so I was telling Geneva before we got on the air that I finished watching a fantastic reality dating show called The Ultimatum, but particularly their queer love season. It is the talk of the town at the moment, at least in the city of Chicago. This episode's coming out a few weeks after, I guess, the show finished, so maybe it won't be the talk of the town anymore by the time this comes out. But if you have not seen it, I would highly recommend. The premise of the show, shall I even explain the premise? But basically, it's the premise. The premise is there are these couples that have been dating for a long time, and one of the partners in the couple wants to get married, the other one doesn't. And so they initiate an ultimatum and they say, we're going to go on this show. And by the end of this journey, it's basically a 6-week, 7-week journey. By the end of these 7 weeks, we're either going to get engaged or we're done. And so there's a lot of twists and turns that come within that of, they end up spending 3 weeks living with someone else that's also there. And then after that, they go back to living 3 weeks with their partner that they initially arrived there with. So there is lots of drama, but also less drama than you would think, because typically dating reality shows have a heck of a lot of drama. This one has drama, but it's not like overwhelmingly ridiculously so. Yeah. So I would highly recommend The Ultimatum Queer Love if you are into that thing or into that type of like genre of television shows. Even if you're not, I still would suggest maybe give one episode a try because you might find yourself falling in love with it because it's really stinking good. But yeah, so that's Queer Love, Ultimatum Queer Love.
Queer Love, Ultimate Edition.
Yeah, Queer Love, Ultimatum. Yeah, so that's that. And then another one, again, I know this episode is coming out a few weeks after, I actually watch these things. By the time you guys hear it, it'll be weeks later. But I'm pretty sure that this film will still be a huge thing by the time this movie comes out, or by the time this podcast episode comes out. But I went to go see Across the Spider-Verse this week. I called Geneva after I saw it in the theater, and I told her that it's going to take a lot for a movie to top this one for me this year. It is just a heck of a lot of fun. The animation is absolutely mind-blowing. If people had their mind blown by the first one, this takes it to a whole other level. This movie is absolutely stunning to look at. The animation style, the colors, I didn't even read comic books growing up, but I can just feel such a love for the source material and just the genre of comic books and all of those things. It has a good story behind it. It is something that I feel like anyone and everyone could watch and find a piece of it to enjoy. The soundtrack is incredible. It's really, really amazing. So if you haven't already seen it, I highly recommend see this in a theater while it is in theaters. This needs to be seen in a theater, preferably on the biggest screen possible. I would highly recommend IMAX. I saw this on a regular screen, and I'm going to be going again this week to see it on an IMAX screen because it really is just that that incredible. So yeah, I find it hard to summarize, not because the movie is, ridiculously convoluted. It's just that there's a lot going on, and I only watched it once, and so I was like, the visuals, but the story, but the visuals, but the music. There's so much. So yeah, I can't necessarily like summarize the story at this point because there's just so much going on, but in the best way possible. So I would highly recommend go see this film. I think I would say take your kids if they're over the age of like, I don't know, 9 or 10. I feel like if they're 6, they're probably too young. 7 or 8 depends on the kid, but I feel like by 9 or 10, I'm not a parent. I don't actually know what I'm talking about. This is just my suggestion. Do whatever you want. But I think that this really is a movie that everyone can enjoy. And I would recommend, if you get the opportunity, don't see it by yourself. Go see it with a friend, with a family member, or just someone else. And if you go by yourself, talk to the people in the theater about it afterwards, because dang. Oh, also be prepared. This movie ends on a huge cliffhanger. Just be prepared
alert.
for that, because you're going to come to the end and you'll be absolutely shocked by where it ends, and potentially even upset if you're not aware of what you're going to be getting into going in. So, but yes, that is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Go see it in a theater. But yeah, that's what I've been watching this week. So yeah. But I guess jumping forward into our specific review for today, today on the show, we are discussing Peter Bogdanovich and Polly Platt's 1973 road trip dramedy Paper Moon. I think I'll leave a little bit of space after this for if Geneva and I want to add a few little things in there, in dedication to Polly Platt, but we don't need to do that. I wanted to make sure her name was stated. Go look up Polly Platt, guys. She's incredible. Anyway,
highly recommend. You might be mentioning this later, but if you are a fan of podcasts about movies and you're not already listening to You Must Remember This, they did an incredible season about Polly Platt and
so
her
good.
Long career in Hollywood and the contributions that she made toward Peter Bogdanovich's movies, but also many other movies throughout many eras in Hollywood. And yeah, she's incredible. So
yeah, Polly Platt is a superstar. Today on the show, we are discussing Peter Bogdanovich and Polly Platt's 1973 road trip dramedy Paper Moon. Taking place during the Great Depression years in America, Paper Moon tells the story of conman Mose, who finds himself accidentally and begrudgingly attached to his young daughter, Addie, after the death of her flapper girl mother. Initially tasked with delivering Addie to her distant aunt, Mose is held hostage by Addie, who demands that he pay her $200 that he owes her. This starts the two on a road trip that emotionally connects them in ways that they did not expect. Through each of them being the only person that can beat the other at their own game, the two form a bond that turns out to be unbreakable. So, after the success of his previous two films, The Last Picture Show and What's Up, Doc, Peter Bogdanovich's ex-wife and longtime partner / collaborator, Polly Platt, suggested that he take on the script adaptation of the book Addie Pray, which would then become Paper Moon. Though the roles of Mose and Addie were originally intended to go to Paul Newman and his daughter Nell Potts, when the two of them departed the project, Ryan O'Neal and his daughter Tatum ended up landing the roles. Having worked with Bogdanovich on What's Up, Doc, O'Neal was ready for an opportunity to collaborate with him again. What the world didn't know was how not Ryan, but his daughter Tatum would steal the show and make the film the success that it was. Her show-stopping and eventually Oscar-winning performance both elevated and grounded the film in a way that few can deny. So that's kind of just some general context as well as a summary for Paper Moon. So, Geneva, why don't you go ahead and start us off with your thoughts on this movie?
Sure, yeah. I first saw this movie only a few months ago. So this is my second time watching within a year. And yeah, I really love this movie so much. It was surprising to me how much I liked it, to be honest, because I can sometimes struggle with media about con artists. I find the concept of con artists creepy in a way that I can't fully explain. It's just the idea of, I think, someone so baldly lying to your face and not being able to trust the person in front of you that I just find very disturbing sometimes. And so sometimes I struggle with media that's directly about a con artist, or is, you know, has a con artist as a protagonist or hero. But for some reason, I didn't have that problem with this movie at all. This movie is very, very charming, in a way that's not overly sentimental. I think the relationship between Addie and Mose is very sweet, but there's a lot of honesty to it as well. I really love the way that Addie is depicted as she's this sort of little girl who's been forced to grow up very quickly. She has a lot of street smarts. She understands what adults are talking about when they say things that, you know, like, this little girl at this age should not be knowing what these things are, but she does. But at the same time, she is just a child. And I love every time they have a moment where she's like listening to the radio and talking about what's about to happen in the story. And I'm like, oh my gosh, kids do that. Like, that's just a thing that kids do. It's very cute. The journey that she takes with Mose over the course of the story, the way that he kind of softens and is able to open up his heart to her a little bit. You know, the end, their central dynamic, you can tell there's always going to be this tension to it, but they really have grown to love each other and need each other. And the way that the story ends with them kind of saying, all right, well, we've accepted the fact that we're throwing in our lots with one another. We're not sure what the future is going to hold, but we're going to face it together. It's just very beautiful. And I think the film does a lot too with the Great Depression 1930s setting, that really just works so well with the themes, works so well with who these characters are as two people who are kind of down on their luck and are just trying to get by through any means possible, but they're not completely without a conscience or without a heart, which helps for me. So yeah, I really love this movie. I think it's very charming. It's very well made, and I was really happy to be able to see it again.
It sounds like, and correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth or whatever, but it sounds like you might agree with what a lot of other people said when this movie first came out, of Tatum O'Neal, her performance as Addie really is the one who completes this film and brings it home.
Oh, absolutely.
Because without her, Mose would be a terrible person that for me, I'd be like, I can't even watch you. Like, I can't stand it. Or it could have become this like really overly sentimental, like, oh my gosh, I'm this daughter who's like doting on her father and my dad saved me. Or like, oh my gosh, I love my daughter so much. She's changed my life. But because of the character of Addie, but also just the incredible performance that Tatum gives in this film, like, not just with, like I said, not just without the character of Addie, but also without Tatum in this role, I feel like the film, I'm not going to say it wouldn't have worked. Maybe it wouldn't have, I don't know, but I don't even want to ask that question of what this movie would have been without her, because without her, this film is just, it's not right.
Yes. With a lesser actor, like child actor in that part, the film would not work. I think like this film succeeding as much as it does is so tone dependent, and that tone is set by Addie and by the relationship that she has with Mose, and the two of them, their chemistry as they banter with each other, argue with each other, is so natural. I know in real life, I don't want to get into this too much, I know in real life there were some issues between Tatum O'Neal and her father. But on screen, in terms of their ability to work together as scene partners, their the chemistry that they have with each other is so good, and it really, really works well for the film and for the tone that it's setting. Yeah,
100%. I absolutely love her performance in this movie. So yeah, I guess just to say real quickly what my thoughts are. This movie's great. I saw it for the first time a few years ago. It might have been in like 2020. I think we said this before on the podcast. 2020 maybe it's 2019. I think it was those 2 years combined. It was just a huge movie time for me of creating this massive list of all these movies that I hadn't seen that I thought I had to see. And Paper Moon was one of them. And so I finally got to watch this movie. And I think kind of similar to Geneva, I wasn't particularly super excited to watch this movie. It was just kind of like, all right, I've heard about this. You know, I've literally heard about it my entire life because my name is Tatum, and people were like, oh, Tatum O'Neal from Paper Moon. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I had known of this movie for a really long time, but I had never seen it. So I finally watched it and I was like, wow, that movie was really, really good. I think for several reasons. Like I said, Tatum's performance is fantastic, but also on top of that, I have a soft spot for father-daughter stories. I just, this is absolutely no shade at all to my mother. My mother is a fantastic person. I admire her. I love her. She's the best mom on the planet. And I'm not just saying that because I have to. I'm saying that because I mean it. But also, me and my dad have a very special relationship, and we have, for a long time. And so movies that just kind of reflect just connections between fathers and daughters and kind of the struggles of that, but also the beauty of that. I really connect with those types of stories, and seeing the character of Addie being such a strong young child. Like, she's very young, but she is not weak because of that. She earns the respect of her father, and he seems like someone who doesn't really give respect to others very easily. But with her, I mean, he really tries to push her away, but he is so just drawn in by her, and she's so endearing and challenging, and but then we also get these really sweet moments where we see her, in the bathroom dressing up like her mom, and, trying to embody some sort of, more girlish characteristic that she maybe tries to hide when she's out in public for all of these different reasons. And, watching the movie this time around, I really caught wow, my brain is like farting today. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So watching the movie this time around, there were a lot of other things that I kind of picked up on, a lot more subtle things in terms of like little references here and there to her history with her mom that might not be explicitly stated, but it's kind of hinted at through seeing it mirrored through other people or other circumstances, or, there's a lot of subtlety here. There's a lot of, kind of like Geneva and I were saying before, like this movie could have very easily become extremely cheesy, very sentimental, super over the top, or the opposite, just being kind of very cringe in a way that's like, oh my gosh, these people are so deplorable. Like, I just can't. Or he's corrupting his daughter and we can't watch this because this is child abuse. Like,
she could also have been very annoying, and you could spend the whole movie wishing that she would go away, but she's not.
There's so many ways this movie could have gone wrong, and it just didn't. And, I think a large portion of that has to do with the acting performance that comes from Tatum, but also I think the cinematography is really beautiful. Not just because they chose to have it be in black and white, but in terms of how shots are framed and how the camera moves, and I don't know. It's really well done. So yeah, the first time I watched this movie, I didn't have low expectations, but I didn't have high expectations either. And I fell in love with it. And, I was very excited to watch it again. And I just really like this movie a lot. I think it's a great film. And, I think it's a movie that also, even though it was made in the 1970s, which in my opinion isn't really that old, but for some people that might be considered an old movie. I feel like for people who would consider movies from the 1970s to be an old movie, this movie feels very modern. It doesn't feel old to me. The script and the acting style and all of those things, it does feel very modern, and I feel like people today could appreciate it still.
Yeah, definitely. It's very
not appreciate it, but like connect with it still, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It doesn't drag too. I think the pacing is very good. I'm curious, in your research, was there any I mean, I don't know how in depth you went with any research, but did you happen to see anything about why the decision was made to shoot this film in black and white?
I did very minimal research for this podcast episode.
That is just something I was curious about. I think it works really well with, I mean, it's, you know, it's set in the 1930s when most films would have been in black and white. So you shoot it in black and white and it kind of instantly transports you to that place. But I still was very curious whether it was a cost-cutting thing or whether it was a specific artistic choice.
I feel like it would have been an artistic choice. I don't see Bogdanovich at this point in his career having to deal with cutting costs.
Yeah,
but
well,
I don't know.
I've never seen Last Picture Show, but that is black and white as well.
It is.
Correct?
I also do not like that movie, but that's okay. I should watch it again. It's been a while, but I honestly have no desire to watch it again.
Well, I'm gonna see it at some point pretty soon. It's on my most recent movie list to watch list. So
please let me know your thoughts when you watch it. But yeah, okay. So let's go ahead. I actually was able to take some notes this time around. It's so interesting. We should do some type of like study as to why some movies lend themselves to taking notes and why some of them don't. Like there's like John Wick, I just watched it and I barely wrote down anything. And then there's some movies where I write down a lot. I don't know why that is, but
yeah. I mean, that one's so much of a sort of visual experience. There's not a whole lot to, I don't know. There's not a whole lot to necessarily be note taking at any given moment. I actually did not take notes during this one. But I watched it just a few hours ago, so it's pretty fresh in my brain.
Yeah. So yeah, just to kind of go through, I guess, starting with my notes here, I did not really take the time to come up with any sort of like smart reason as to what the significance of this might be. I just kind of observed it and was like, there's probably a meaning here that's really deep, but I'm just not thinking about it right now. But the opening shot that we have, or the opening scene rather, at the funeral, where we've got these three figures and then we have Addie and then eventually Mose shows up. And I thought it was really interesting how, especially in the black and white, we see how these three adults are dressed in this very dark black. And then Addie is dressed in this pure white dress. And then we have Mose coming in and he's dressed in like a gray suit. I was like, that's interesting how all of these, you know, characters that are here briefly, and we're not going to see them again at this funeral, they're in all black. And then she's in a stark white. And then he's in this like in between gray. And I was like, there's probably some sort of meaning here, but I'm not going to think about it at the moment. But I just wanted to note that because I just thought that opening sequence was shot really beautifully. Because I think a lot of this movie is not really shot very wide. It's kind of like the characters fill up a lot of the screen. It's not really like, oh, super wide shots and the characters are really small in the middle. That does happen throughout the film, but I think a lot of the shots are predominantly like the characters fill the screen. And so, you know, when we do get those moments, like in this opening sequence, for example, where the camera is wider, I don't know. I just think it's beautiful. Again, there's probably some symbolic reason as to why the wider shots are wider shots. But I watched this movie at like 8 a.m. and I wasn't going to do that at 8 a.m. So, did you notice any of that, though, in terms of just like the cinematography of like wider versus close up or anything like that?
Not with that specifically, but I was thinking on this rewatch how well this film uses the landscape of the place that it's filmed. This film takes place across the kind of not Midwest, South Central. What part of the country is it? South.
It's the Midwest. It's Kansas and Missouri. So
Kansas and Missouri. Yeah, those sort of Great Plains states where it's very flat. You can kind of see for miles these very dusty roads. And, you know, it really does evoke that sort of Dust Bowl era. Everyone is kind of out in the country. And so there's a certain sense of country values that are in the people that they're encountering. There are a lot of chases that happen in cars that make great use of these kind of wide roads that go on for miles. You get the sense that everything is kind of dry and people are just kind of a little bit desperate, you know, a little bit struggling. And so there is that sense of kind of simultaneously everyone needs to, as Addie says, like as Frank D. Roosevelt says, everyone needs to help each other out. And so you get a sense of that throughout the movie, but then conversely, that sense of everyone is out for what they can get. Everyone is trying to keep themselves afloat, even if it's at the expense of everyone else. And I think all of that is in the way that they use the landscape and through the cinematography.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective. Yeah, I think, just to kind of add on top of that, like this movie is just, I know I keep saying this, it's just very well shot. I feel like there's so much to chew on here. I feel like you could almost not pick things apart frame by frame, but you could really analyze things down to a T if you really wanted to, because there's just so much going on here in terms of not just, what's being captured or what types of lenses or how the camera's moving, but also in terms of like, how the camera is filming the clothing or filming, the type of how the wind is moving in this place or whatever it might be. Like, it seems to be very intentional to me, exactly where the cameras are placed and what they're capturing and why. And it sounds like a stupid thing to say, because it's like, don't all movies do that? I mean, yes, but I feel like with this one in particular, it just feels very intentional to me. And I feel like I can see the choices, and I really appreciate that.
So much of this movie, I mean, you call it a road trip dramedy, which, it very much is. So much of this movie is the characters in a car together, driving in a car, sitting in the front seat, bantering with each other. And so you get those close-ups of the two of them filling the frame as they're having conversations. But then you also get these beautiful shots of the car moving throughout these very wide, flat landscapes. And then it is that idea of just kind of the two of them alone together against the entire world, trying to make their way through this massive landscape, basically, that is harsh. It's not really a lush, verdant place that is teeming with activity. It's the two of them in this kind of lonely wasteland that they need to find their way through it. And I think that really also informs the struggles that they go throughout the film.
Yeah, it's the two of them against the world, Yep. And it really feels that way. I just kind of to just continue with something I was saying before in terms of like the camera capturing certain things, but I really enjoyed the wardrobe in this movie, because I see there being a lot of communication as to who specific characters are through what they're wearing. And the opening sequences that we have with Mose, he's wearing this nice striped suit, but it is incredibly wrinkled. It is very, very like, you cannot not see how wrinkled this suit is. And I feel like if you were a costumes person on set, it would be so, like, it's so noticeable that if it wasn't supposed to be that way, they would be like, excuse me, we need to go in and like swap out this jacket. So the fact that his suit is in that state, I think that it says so much about his character of just, he's a con man, right? He's trying to present himself as this person who's very official and a man of the church who's selling Bibles and blah, blah, blah. He's a stand-up guy. But if you really look closely, he's actually a mess. And
it's
he's
all
just
facade. It's
a complete lie, but that's just his character. And then we see kind of Addie going through her arc of dressing in overalls and just having this little cute hat that she wears all the time, and that she feels very comfortable in her own skin. But then we get these hints that, but maybe she wants to try being something different, but she doesn't know how. And then she tries on dresses, and then she seems to be pretty comfortable in them as time goes on. Initially, she's like, why is this bow in my hair? I hate this. But then as time goes on, she really seems to love it. But then we see her again in her overalls at the end. And so we see this kind of evolution of, she started in this place where she felt more repressed in terms of, this is who I have to be, and I'm too nervous to maybe, or not fully confident enough to try doing something different, to then towards the end being like, no, I feel confident in both of these different skins of myself, if that makes sense. And then, we see Trixie's wardrobe and her, tight and striped dresses and all of these things. But then when she's in her room by herself, she's completely disheveled. And I don't know. I really liked the costumes in this movie. I thought that I just thought the costume design was very well done. So
yeah,
I don't know if you noticed any of that. I know you're a costumes person, but
yeah, and I could not agree more. I love Trixie's costumes. I love that bright or white, sort of frilly organza or cotton dress that she's wearing that
when she's
Mose apparently
tripping
buys
up
to
the
her.
hill.
Yeah, it's like the most impractical outfit you could possibly wear in this terrain because it is so tight, it is so white. You know, it's instantly she's going to start sweating through it and she's going to get dirt on it, but she feels like she needs to keep up the appearance that she is this fine lady who's sort of above everything else, which we need to talk about that scene because that's a great scene. With Mose, I really love what you pointed out about how this suit, I think he wears pretty much the same suit throughout, although, you know, if it's different gray suits, they're all kind of the similar gray stripes, so it's kind of hard to tell. But there's this one great scene where he and Addie are staying at a hotel and he comes in late in the middle of the night and he's tipsy, and she just watches as he carefully folds up his pants and then throws them under the mattress.
Violently tosses them
under the mattress, clearly as a, like, you know, a free way to press his pants overnight. But then he just flops down on the bed still in his suit jacket. Like, he does not even take off his jacket. He just takes off the pants and then the jacket he just like falls asleep in.
I'm pretty sure he's incredibly drunk at that time as well. But yes, there's just that's why I called this movie, because when I was writing it initially, I was like, I don't even know, because I feel like it's a drama, but it's almost kind of a comedy, which is why I landed on dramedy, because there's some really funny moments in this movie, like him taking the time to fold and then just throwing it under the mattress, or like I honestly think that this might be if not the absolute, one of my absolute just favorite parts of this movie that makes me laugh so hard is the moment when Trixie and Imogen are getting back in the car and Trixie's like, don't break anything now, and Imogen just completely slams her bags in the back of the car, and it's just like clearly there's noises that things are breaking and shattering, and she just does not care at all.
As well she shouldn't.
There's just so many moments in this movie where it genuinely is very funny. And I also love this moment in the beginning. And part of me was like, is this character introduction? Is it trying to tell us something about his character? And then part of me is like, I literally think that it is just to be funny, because I don't see how this really pushes his character. But when we first see Mose in that diner and he's putting I don't even know how much sugar into his coffee.
I didn't even notice that.
He is pouring. He's got this huge sugar shaker thing that's pouring out he's not shaking it. He's pouring sugar. And you should look up the clip again, because he is literally pouring sugar nonstop for probably 20 seconds of just holding sugar, pouring into his cup. And I'm like, I think this is just supposed to be funny, because I don't think it really contributes much to him as a con man or whatever.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would it go on for that long?
Yeah.
But,
well, the very first, and this does definitely contribute to his setup instantly, his character as a con man. I noticed the first time, this time going through, the very first time that we see Mose, when he pulls up at the cemetery, as he's walking up and everyone else is praying, and so they're not looking at him, he quickly steals a bunch of flowers off of another grave and then comes up to them and holding the flowers like he brought them. It's very funny.
I wanted to talk to you about this, because it was a thought that didn't occur to me the first time I watched it, but it did this time around. Why do you think he went to the funeral?
I think because he was in the area. He would not have driven out of his way.
How does he even know? Has he been keeping track of her all this time?
I think he heard about what happened, and I think he did genuinely have affection for Addie's mother. The way he talks about her, how he's constantly praising her, to me that doesn't read as completely disingenuous. I think he did genuinely really like her. But I think also with the circumstances of how he died, the very first thing he does before leaving town is he goes to the brother of the man who killed her. Basically, she was killed in a drunk driving accident, we learned. Yeah. And so he goes to the brother of the guy who was driving at the time and shakes him down for $200. So I would not be surprised if he learned about the circumstances, was in the area, and so was genuinely like, well, maybe I'll go and pay my respects, but also saw an opportunity to be like, well, maybe I can get something out of this, you know? And then meeting Addie just ended up being a wrinkle that he did not expect.
Yeah. You have my job. No, I don't have your job, but you do.
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, not particularly, but I do think that you kind of saying that is getting the wheels turning in my head, because it's something that I did notice this time around watching the movie, which maybe I noticed the first time around, I don't know, but this time I focused on it a lot more. I do see a lot of parallels, I think, being drawn between Trixie and Addie's mom. And we see Addie kind of have this respect for her after she has that conversation with her on the hill, and, you know, Trixie kind of gets real with her about her life situation. And, you know, I see Addie kind of softening towards this woman because she sees like, oh, this is my mom almost, you know? And I think we see a connection between Mose and Trixie as well. I think that initially it's kind of like, oh, she's hot and like I can just drive her around and whatever and make myself feel cool by buying her things. But then I do think genuinely when we do, you know, hear about him seeing her with that other guy from the hotel and he leaves, I don't remember the exact line, but it was something of like, I really actually liked that woman and I wanted to keep her around and all that stuff. So I'm not necessarily saying he knows how to love well. But I do think that we see through Trixie that he does genuinely, he can have genuine affection for women that he meets in like brothels or whatever it might be. And so all of that long, you know, roundabout way to answer your question is like, I guess now that you're talking about it, I can see how potentially he did have some sort of connection with her. Yeah, I mean, I don't see him traveling a long way to, you know, and he does genuinely seem surprised that she does have a child that is his, because I think if it had been something where it's like, oh, I knew she had my kid and I've been keeping tabs because I wanted to know what was going on with my child, he wouldn't have been so surprised by her. So I think in as kind of ridiculous as it sounds almost, but like I do think it was a coincidence of he just happened to kind of be there and or was close by somewhat and was like, okay, you know, I knew this lady once, I might as well go. And who knows, maybe he wanted to shake down some of the people at the funeral. Like I don't know, because I think the fact that he stole flowers while walking up to the grave, you know, doesn't entirely communicate that he wholeheartedly wanted to pay his respects. I think there was something else there too. But yeah, I don't know. I do think it was a coincidence, but it seems like a pretty uncanny coincidence, but it gets the ball rolling for the rest of the story. So it's fine.
Yeah.
And you know, minor details.
Yes, yeah. And actually, I'm so glad that you drew the connection between Trixie and Addie's mom, because that's something that jumped out on me on this rewatch as well.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned before your interpretation of her costuming being this kind of arc. And I think I don't disagree with that necessarily, but I don't know. I was very interested by her costuming in this movie and the way that she views femininity and the sort of ambivalence that she has toward it, where she does seem to be, I guess, what they would call at the time a tomboy. You know, she's very much more comfortable in these sort of masculine or at least androgynous clothing. You know, we see that she has this photograph of her with her mom. It's the only time we see what her mom looked like. And her mom is very conventionally feminine and is posing very flirtatiously. And Addie's just in her little overalls, like looking so cranky, which is very funny.
Her classic look.
Yeah. But her sort of curiosity towards femininity, I found very interesting in this sort of, I don't think this is unusual at all for little girls, for some of whom grow up to be like, you know, more sort of masculine or androgynous in this style, but some of them do grow up then to be more conventionally feminine in their comfort level. But there is this sort of curiosity and exploration at that age, and a I don't know, sort of a fascination and also repulsion at the same time, where there's that sort of, I don't know, power attached to femininity in a sense that they're kind of curious about, but also a little afraid of. And Addie's upbringing is so unique in that obviously she was, you know, witnessing her mom's like being similar to Trixie from what we can gather, and, you know, sleeping with a lot of different men and like being very conventionally feminine and using it to kind of get men and live this sort of, you know, more party girl kind of lifestyle. And so that's what Addie was around. And the fact that she kind of, as a reaction to that, potentially is dressing in this more androgynous style. But then she does clearly have this sort of curiosity toward it. And when people call her, like mistake her for a boy because she has this very androgynous haircut, she gets very offended by it. You know, she's like, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. Why don't people understand that? And yeah, I just found it very interesting. Her, she, I think over the course of the film, like eventually learns to perform femininity to a certain extent, though it's usually more in the service of their scams, you know, as a way to kind of appear as this like cute, pure little girl because it'll be really helpful for Mose in whatever scam he's pulling. And so I think she does find some level of comfort with it, but it is also in a sense a performance, which, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be very curious to see if they were, obviously this would never happen, but like theoretically, if you were to check in on Addie 10, 15 years after this movie takes place, what she would look like and the life that she would be living. I mean, can't imagine that Mose would provide her a very stable or healthy environment, no matter how much he does ultimately, I think, secretly love her. So yeah, I'd be very curious to see what she sort of, what her life ends up looking down the road when she becomes an adult and is able to kind of take control and make these very active choices about how to present herself and how to live her life.
Well, speaking as a former tomboy child and also current tomboy adult, I can definitely agree with, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I loved this movie the first time I watched it, because even though I'm way older than Addie is at this point in my life, I see a lot of my past self in her, you know, having this dynamic of this is how and this is me speaking as like, you know, 10-year-old me, not as my current age, but at that age being like, okay, I know that I am more comfortable in this type of clothing, but also I want to be seen as a girl. I don't want to be seen as a boy. And like, what does that mean? Why do I have to dress a certain way in order for people to see me a certain way? But what if I don't want to do that? And, you know, I see a lot of I see a lot of myself in the character of Addie, and I think that adds an extra layer as to why I like this movie so much. And, you know, I remember when I watched this movie for the first time a few years ago, I spoke with my mom afterwards. I was like, it's kind of hilarious how me and Tatum O'Neal have the same name, and I also can really relate to this fictional character. And my mom was like, yeah, I thought the same thing when you were born, because, you know, obviously this movie came out long before I was born, but as my mom, you know, started to see me growing up, she was like, oh, this is interesting. Not that I'm a con person, but I'm definitely and always have been someone who can go tit for tat with someone who's, you know, challenging me or whatever.
Yeah,
but
you're
anyway,
not a con person, but I could, if you were forced by circumstances
if I wanted
join
to be
up
a
with
con person,
I feel like you'd do pretty well.
Yeah,
okay.
I could make it happen if I needed to. But thankfully I haven't needed to do that. But yeah, so you kind of talking a little bit about just kind of Addie and her relationship with Trixie. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned in there, you were saying all of these things about like, you know, Addie looks like this and she might think like this, and what about the future or whatever. But I think Trixie made it very clear about what Addie's future is because of her bone structure.
Oh my gosh.
Because she's got this bone structure. And so she's going to just become the same person as Trixie because of her bone structure. You know, Trixie didn't have bone structure, so she never thought, but then she got the bone structure. I was like, girl, if you say bone structure one more time. And this whole time, Addie's just sitting there like, Oh my gosh. Shut up.
Yeah, but that scene actually, sorry, just a side tangent of appreciation for Madeline Kahn and how great she is in this movie. Am I wrong that she got like a Best Actress, Supporting Actress?
She was nominated for
this?
Supporting Actress, yeah.
Yeah. Very well deserved. Madeline Kahn was the absolute best. But that scene on the hillside, so Addie is really cranky that, for understandable reasons, that Trixie has joined up with them. She's being very annoying. Mose is going and spending all this money on her. And Addie is, so they go have this picnic, and Addie is refusing to come back to the car until she can sit up front. And Trixie goes and talks to her, and at first is all like, trying to be all sweet and offer her things. And then she's like, you better get down to the car or else. But then finally she turns and she kind of talks to Addie as an almost like adult to adult, woman to woman. Yeah. Where she's just kind of admits, like, I know I'm going to screw this up eventually. I am never able to make my relationships with men last. So you don't really need to worry. You just need to wait it out. I'm just in this to get something out of it. Your dad will get something out of it. You'll get something out of it. And yeah, just hang in there a little bit longer, and eventually I'm going to be gone because I know who I am, and I know the effect that I have on men, basically, and what I can get out of them. I don't know. It's this very interesting, humanizing moment for Trixie, who is someone who else, throughout most of the rest of the movie is just this kind of shallow, annoying,
obnoxious
bossy person. Yeah, very obnoxious. I mean, she's terrible to her maid. She's just, she's just constantly, clearly just out for her own kind of advancement, her own good time. But there is that nice moment where she gets to be kind of like a little bit self-reflective, and Addie really responds to that. And that's the only thing that convinces her to come down, is Trixie actually treating her like a intelligent person and opening up to her a little bit. And I just found that moment to be really interesting, and again, very, very well acted by both of them.
Yeah, I mean, something that I wrote down in my notebook was that I genuinely think that everyone in this movie is a con person, because we see that through everyone. We see it through Mose in a very obvious way, and then also kind of through Addie in a very obvious way. But then through Trixie, she's kind of pulling her own con on people because she's acting a certain way in order to get certain treatment from men, in order to kind of just survive and get a little bit farther along, which is the same thing that Mose and Addie are doing. And then I think that Imogene is doing the same thing. She's like, I hate this woman that I'm working for, but I have to put on this show in order to be taken care of as long as I need to be until I can move on to something else. And we even see that with the cops too. At the end, it's like, okay, we're gonna act a certain way, but if we can't capture you here, we're at least going to treat you badly. Well, I just think that this whole movie is a representation of, everyone here is a con person. And I think it's an interesting question of which of them are con people out of just because they want to be versus con people because they have to be. Because, this is the Great Depression era. And so there isn't really much to be had. And at least I think that that's kind of what's suggested in the movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so I just think that that's a really interesting question to ask. And I feel like in that moment with Trixie and Addie, yes, it's a conversation. I agree with you. It is a conversation of like adult to adult, woman to woman. But I think it's also a conversation of from con person to con person, from desperate person to desperate person, because like she says, I get something out of it. You get something out of it. He gets something out of it. We all need something. So let's just hold on to this while we can, because soon enough, we're all going to be lacking something. So let's hold on to what we have now. And I just think that that's kind of a thread that we see throughout the whole movie. And it's interwoven through all of these different dynamics and interactions and scenarios. And I just think it's really well done. And that scene, like you said, with Trixie and Addie, it is just, I think it's really beautiful. And I really appreciate seeing that moment with Trixie, because kind of like you said, maybe it would have bothered me even more than you. I don't know. But like, if not for this scene, I would absolutely hate Trixie. She's so obnoxious. I cannot stand her, not to mention how she treats Imogene, which makes me not just annoyed, but also angry. but I just think it makes her human, and I think it shows again more so that connection between how Addie can see her as her mother, and also like, and through seeing Trixie as her mother, also kind of see her mother as a person, because she's seeing the side of Trixie of being a person. I don't know, it's just kind of this whole amalgamation of Trixie representing her mom, at least in my opinion, and unpeeling all of these layers. And I just,
or at least like the part of her mom that she probably has some resentment towards and is reacting against,
Well, I was also going to say, yes, I agree with that, but I think also a part of her mother that she has empathy for too, because one of the things I really like, or another one of the things I really like about this movie, is that Addie is not just a bratty little kid. She's not just this like demanding firehouse of a girl who's just like, she's also very empathetic, because we see, I think for me, the first moment that I can remember seeing that is when her and Mose go to con that one family, and Addie totally picks up on like, this is a single mother with 7 children, and her husband just died. She has nothing. Like, we need to walk away. And Mose wouldn't have done that if Addie hadn't have been there. And, we see her softening towards Trixie when Trixie actually is vulnerable and talks about an area where she has weakness and she needs help, And I love seeing that in Addie, because I think, without seeing the softer sides of these characters, this movie would have been a lot harder to swallow. And I think through seeing the empathy from Addie, we see that kind of making its way to Mose as well. Mose starts to soften a little bit because of the interactions he has with Addie, and they both kind of change each other. And I think it's great. I love how Addie is a child, but she also is, she's an adult who's impacting adults in adult ways, but she's also a child. It's just this crazy combination. I think she's just such a great character.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what she chooses to do, the way that she eventually orchestrates a trap for Trixie so that Mose walks in on her having sex with the what do you call it? The
concierge.
The concierge of this hotel, and, breaks up Mose and Trixie through that. I mean, that is...
And also gives Imogene money to get home.
Yeah. I mean, that's her consciously making the choice to rescue Imogene and to rescue Mose, like to extricate them from this woman who is not good for either of them. It is her making this very adult and, definitely like as a child, she's maybe not fully thinking through the potential consequences of how this could have gone wrong. But it does go okay. But it is her like consciously exercising this, these two people that I care about are being harmed by their association with this woman, and I need to find some way to free them. There's so many times throughout the film that she protects Mose in one way or another. He provides protection for her in the fact that he's the adult in the relationship, but she is also looking out for him. They really do need each other in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, they're a team. And one of the things I love is that, again, kind of repeating what I said a little bit, but I do feel like Addie is a child, but she also is this adult too. And I think there's tragedy to that in terms of like, let a kid be a kid, don't make them grow up too fast, which there is an element of that to her for sure.
Absolutely.
But there's also great sides to that too, of like, Moses kind of careless in ways that are not good. And Addie steps in and takes control in places where control needs to be taken. Like, she is essentially the manager of the money. Like, one of my favorite quotes that I wrote down was this sequence where Mose goes up to her in the street and he's like, "Give me a 20." And she goes, "What for?" And then he gives her such sass. He's like, "Give me a 20." But it's like he has to ask her for permission, and she asks him, "Why? What do you need it for?" He's like, "I'm the adult here. Like, what?"
At the end, when he has taken all their money, I'm blanking on exactly why, but he is jumped by the corrupt policeman and beaten up, and he has no money left. When she's like, "I kept a $10 in case of emergencies," like, that's such a like, yeah, clearly she is the responsible one between the two of them.
Which is quite frightening, but you know.
Yeah. Well, it also
But
is
it's
interesting too, though, like, again, with her being so mature and yet also being a child, she's the one that first steps up their con artist like ambitions, I guess. You know, he has clearly worked out this system and has figured out here is the amount that I can push this,
$8.
and I will feel safe that I'm not going to get arrested. You know, he has this price that he has set for the Bibles that he's scamming people into buying. And she pushes it, and she's able to gauge these different situations and say, we can charge more to this person because they're rich and they're not going to care. And he's really worried about it, you know, understandably. He's like, I'm going to get arrested if you push this too far. And she is this sort of childlike, like, no, let's push this for all we can, you know. And she turns out to be right, but it is I think also a sign that she is younger and more reckless and, you know, less aware of potential bad consequences.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting how I think that this is our only real interaction or encounter with like people that don't have nothing in this movie, but that one interaction with that woman. And he's kind of hesitant of $24, but the woman doesn't even give it a second thought. She's like, okay, let me go get my checkbook. And I just think that is, you know, it's a very brief moment in the movie, but I think just having a little bit of a hint of that, especially during this Great Depression kind of era, really communicates of like, just the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the financial inequality that existed during this time of like, there were people that had nothing and could not get out. And then the people who had a lot and kind of didn't really have to worry because they just had so much. And I'm not going to claim to be a historian of the Great Depression because I'm not. So, but I just think that that's really interesting that that's kind of our one brief interaction we have with someone who is wealthy. But I think kind of just going back, because we haven't really talked too much about Mose, I feel like, but I just wanted to say that one thing I do really like is because I do think that he, you know, obviously he starts out as this guy who does not want to be a caretaker at all. Like we literally have this moment where Addie asks him, you don't like me much, do you? And he goes, no, I don't like you. Like he straight up says, no, I don't like you. But then I think after that moment, they go and do their first kind of con together. And then after that, they're back in the car and they're both sitting there just kind of smiling, you know, for a long time. They're both just sitting there wordlessly smiling. And it's kind of the start of this arc for him where he really does become more of a, I was going to say nurturing. I don't know if nurturing is the right word, but like more aware of the fact that he has a child that needs to have some sort of care or guidance or whatever. But I just find it to be really interesting, his parenting decisions. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like I find it really interesting how he gives her a lot of freedom in certain ways. And maybe that's bad. Maybe that's good. I don't know.
I mean, he's the man is clearly not equipped to be a parent. Like he, you know, he learns, he gets better over the course of the film, but it's, you know, it's not something he was expecting, and it's definitely not. He would not be your first choice to suddenly get the parenting of this. How old is she? 9?
I think 9. Yeah.
But
I do like. I just like seeing those elements of him trying his attempt at parenting and some things that he does really well at and some things that he doesn't. Like when he first discovers that she's smoking in the room, he's like, I think you're too young for that. But then his ultimate decision is like, you're going to set the room on fire. And that's why it's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, but then I also love how we have,
but then he also, no, he doesn't stop her. She just keeps smoking and then he just turns out the light. Like he doesn't actually make her put out the cigarette.
Yeah. And so I love how we have moments like that. But then we have another moment where like after that night where Addie is in the bathroom and like completely bathing in perfume, you know, the next morning they're sitting in this car. And I feel like this is such a good dad moment of like, I'm not going to make my child feel awkward. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to acknowledge that like, this is something that a child did for whatever reason, doesn't matter. I'm just going to open the window. I'm not going to make them feel uncomfortable. I'm just going to be like, hey, it's a kid thing. Let's deal with it. I'm just going to open the window. And I thought that was really sweet. I thought it was a really sweet gesture of like, just a parent, like a parental choice. I really liked that.
Yeah, that that's a sweeter interpretation. I just thought it was hilarious because the look on Addie's face, like when he's sniffing her, she looks so proud, and then he opens the window, and then she's like, "Oh, dang it!" Then she starts to like, "Oh, he doesn't like it. I may have gone too far." I just found it really funny.
Someone's got to tell her, just in a loving way. I feel like that's
not how
way
you put
of telling
perfume
her.
on, girl. Like, she doesn't have a mother to tell her these things. She's got to find out.
It's a bit much. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a really sweet.
Yeah. Well, can I just say, I think it's very funny, and I 100% agree with you. But you have just from the beginning been like, "Yep, he's her father," even though in the movie he never acknowledges that he's her father. Like even to the end,
they have the same jawline.
They
Geneva.
both
they have
know.
the same jawline.
Yeah, they both know. Like there's not really a question.
Look at the bone structure.
Look at the bone structure. You know, Mr. Pritchard and Mr. Cooper or whatever, those other two people in the town, they were nice to me, but they don't have my jaw. Anyway,
nope.
I just find it really interesting that by the end they've kind of accepted like this is our relationship, this is who we are to each other. But he still never actually says like, "Yeah, I think I might be your father."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, and I'm not saying that you disagree with this statement because I
mean clearly
I don't
he
think
is her
that
father. Like I
was gonna say that like, you know, I don't think that you have to be, I don't know. I just think that this really shows that like, it doesn't matter if you're biologically related, like you can be a parent and child regardless of, it just depends on like, are you guys going to take on those roles and care for each other and trust in that relationship? And that's really all that matters. You know, people adopt people all the time and that's father, child, whatever. But that being said, I'm kind of like, you know, Mose, I love you. I think you're doing the best you can, but I also feel like if you were being maybe, I don't know, part of me is like, if you were really being a good father, you would have her stay with her aunt, who is very clearly a loving person who has a home and like a child who would be Addie's cousin that she could,
stable place for her to live and go to school.
Part of me is like, Mose, you should recognize that that's better for her. But also I'm like, is it better for her? I don't know, because she's bonded with this person and maybe she doesn't, maybe the effects of like the after effects of her being abandoned would actually be more harmful. I don't know. But I feel like there should have at least been a discussion about it. I feel like
he
Mo
could have
should have gone in,
come in
talked to
and
the aunt,
yes.
have a conversation with the aunt, maybe come up with some sort of like shared custody or like you come visit once a month or I don't know. Something could have been worked out here. So it's not fully Mose and never the aunt, you know, but
yeah. Well, their dynamic is so interesting because there is so much equality to it. And I feel like that is part of the reason why he refuses to acknowledge the fact that he is her father, even though he clearly is that from the very beginning, he treats her like an adult. From the very beginning, he is doing business propositions with her and they are literal partners in crime. And, you know, he's putting her in charge of she's taking control of the money and he has to ask her permission and everything. And if he was actually to acknowledge the fact that he was her father, that would probably put the impetus on him to take more control and to be more, all right, because I'm your father, I need you to do these things, even though, you know, if it's better in your best interest as a child, but also it's probably not in my interest as much, which he probably doesn't want to do because she is so good for business. You know, has this natural aptitude. They do great together as a team. But there is that kind of, you know, I think for him to acknowledge their familial role more would do harm to the partnership that they've established. And the ending, I mean, it's interesting that the ending is her actively choosing to stay with him. And he sort of like feebly protests, but like, you know, he clearly wants her to stay. They want to be together and to continue this. But when I had this thought when she's running down the road to join him, I'm like, I feel like this is the ending of a rom-com where like someone is running through the airport to get to catch the other person before they get on the plane. Like there is that, obviously there's, you know, not a romantic element there, but there is that sense of equality between the two of them, even though one is an adult and one is a child.
Well, I don't think, and I'm not saying this is necessarily what you're saying, but I don't think that Mose fully puts that on her without her inviting it, because their first interaction is her immediately being like, you owe me $200. He doesn't start out with this business transaction. She's the one who starts it. And
That's a really good point.
And he tries to push it away, and she's like, no. I earned that money for you, and I was aware enough to recognize that that's what was happening. You owe me $200. And then she starts screaming, and he's like, oh my God, And so I think that she invites it, and she asks for it too in lots of ways. And so I don't think it's, it's just an interesting dynamic of, again, kind of going back to something that I mentioned earlier, like, how much of this is something where Mose, assuming he was a qualified parent, which he's not, but assuming he was in this sort of situation, would it be better for him to kind of put his foot down and be like, no, I'm the adult, blah, 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 like go to timeout or whatever until I'm right? Or would it be smarter to kind of work with her and see her as the adult that she wants to be seen as and not make her feel smaller? And that's one of the things I really like about him. Again, is he the most capable parent? No, but I do like how I don't think he necessarily treats her as an adult. I think he treats her like a human, and she is asking to be treated like an adult. And so, whether that's her smoking or her, asking for $200 or her managing the money or whatever, this is clearly her asking for something. And he's giving it to her because he's like, okay, I'm going to treat you like the adult that you want to be and all of that. So I think that on the one hand, I see a lot of beauty in that relationship, and I see a lot of love and respect there that I think a lot of parents don't necessarily have for their children because they see them as kids. And I think sometimes parents treat their kids as kids because the parents are actually adults. I feel like Mose is kind of a child. So
absolutely.
Like
there is
Addie,
something sort of emotionally stunted in Mose. I mean, we hear just a tiny bit of his backstory, the fact that his family is kind of broken and scattered. I think he says, like, I forget exactly what he said. He has a sister, but he doesn't know where she is, and maybe both his parents are dead. I can't remember exactly what, but like clearly there is something in him that is like, this is not the most mature man, maybe, who's had like the most stable childhood himself, and so then would understand what a child theoretically needs to be a child.
Yeah, I think that in a lot of ways, it's almost like Addie, I feel like they're the same age. Like Addie is older than her age, and Mose is a lot younger than his age, and because of that, they're kind of the same age.
They meet in the middle.
Which is almost kind of gives that same dynamic of, we're just careless teenagers that met each other, and now we're going off on this adventure without a care in the world. Like, let's figure it out as we go. So I think, I don't know, I just think it's an interesting question, at least for me, to think about, is it better to kind of treat a child as the adult and give them the respect that they're asking for? Or is it better to like kind of speak to them and help them recognize like, no, you're a kid. Like you shouldn't have to be worrying about these things. Like you need to be a kid. And I don't think that Mose is necessarily capable of doing that, but now I'm just kind of psychologically analyzing Addie as a character. Like, what would actually be better for her? Would it be better for her to be treated as an adult because that's how she sees herself? Or would it be better for someone to kind of, make her think a little bit more about that and be like, do you actually want to be an adult? Or is this just the way that you've been groomed to be and you actually should be treated as a child because that's what's best for you? I mean, I think ultimately we see her choose because she chooses between Mose and her aunt was very clearly like more of a, oh, I'll cook you some food. I'll take care of you. I'll give you a bath. You can sleep with your cousin. You guys can play outside in the yard. And Addie clearly doesn't want that for herself, but does she actually not want that?
Yeah, I mean, she is 9 years old. I don't know if she's necessarily capable of understanding what will be best for her in the long run.
But I'm just thinking, like, for me, from my perspective as an adult, if I were to meet someone like her, what would be best?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
but I'm not a child psychologist.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't work in child services.
based on my understanding of child development, it probably would be best for the child to be in a situation where they do not have to be the primary responsible caretaker for another adult, and can actually be in a place where they can be among children of their own age and go to school and play. But, there is also a level of kind of love and connection that she's getting from Mose that she probably would not get from her aunt.
But do we know that, though?
I don't know.
She could have got. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I wrote down, which this is kind of my last note. Obviously, we can talk about other things if we want to, but this is just the last thing in my notebook. This was almost the quote that I chose to open the podcast, which was, "Daddy, I need to go to the shit house." Oh, it's so great. It's so great. I totally forgot about that line, and then she said that, and I was like, that is just the best thing ever. It says so much about her character. Which actually reminds me, we haven't talked really at all about the whole kind of police sequence that happens towards the end.
Bootlegging scam that they attempt to run that gets
which
them in trouble with the law.
Actually think is brilliant. I think that if that guy had not been the brother of a police officer, it would have been a super awesome con. I just think it was so cool that
it was their most lucrative con by far.
They stole his own alcohol and sold it to like, I think it's brilliant. I love that. Not that I would do that to anybody, but I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then Mose kind of snickers as he drives off. He's like, he bought his own liquor.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Didn't realize police officer was hiding behind a tree. He heard every word.
So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that whole kind of last scam that we have with the police officers and the chase and everything, or not too much?
Not too much, apart from, it's just a very well done extended sequence. There's so many different elements to it, because there's the sort of figuring out what's going on with the alcohol and realizing that the bootlegger stash is there, and then executing the con itself. But then there's this sort of couple chases, because they get chased, they get caught, they're in the police station. Addie brilliantly stashes the money in her hat in a place that they were not looking, which is great, and gets the two of them to escape. And then there's another great chase sequence. There's that whole weird sequence where they try to swap cars with this old truck, the hillbillies, and then Mose has to wrestle with one of them, played by
that guy. That's the same guy from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Oh, well, he was also in What's Up, Doc, making this, by my count, 3 people, although maybe there's more who are in What's Up, Doc and now are in Paper Moon. But anyway, yeah, I love the fact that Mose actually wins the wrestling match. You totally expect that he's going to get his ass kicked, but he doesn't.
Yep.
He fights dirty, but the little wink he gives to Addie afterwards is very cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much there.
I love how he reaches to open the car door and the truck door and it just
off.
falls off.
Yeah, he's like, the tires are new. This is great. And then it's like, well, the rest of it's not, but
there is so much of kicking tires in this movie. Like, oh, are these new tires? Let's kick it and find out. I'm like, I don't think that's actually how you can tell good quality of tires or not, but okay.
I don't know much about cars.
So many people do it throughout the movie. And I'm just like, okay. Maybe this is something they did in the 30s. I don't know.
Could be. I don't know. Expert tire kicker. I just noticed on this watch that when he acquires the old truck and has to swap out his old car, he still keeps that little
the spinny thing.
Yeah, the spinning thing on the nose of the car. He transplants it onto the old truck. He always has to keep it with him.
Yep. I love how there's this whole thing of the whole movie. I want my $200. It's like he could have just sold it and gotten the $200
at any point. There are so many points throughout the whole movie that they have the $200. He could just give it to her and they could part ways. But no, they want to be together.
Speaking of kind of the this last final con that kind of starts the whole police thing, I found it to be interesting that Addie's the one who initiates it because Mose is going through a breakup. It's like Mose is upset that Trixie
he needs a
sleeping with
distraction.
someone else, and Addie sees that he's upset, and she's like, you see that guy coming in and out? Maybe we should check him out, see if there's like some potential there to maybe do something.
Yeah.
You know, she's such an interesting
observant.
character.
Just the sequence, the very first time that Mose, well, apart from when he gets the money out of the brother of the guy who kills her mom, the very first time he runs the Bible scam in front of Addie, where she's sitting in the car, and it's really good filmmaking too, because you're hearing in voiceover what Mose is saying to the lady about how like, oh, you know, your dead husband bought this Bible. And then Addie is like looking through the contents of the car, and she discovers the Bibles and the press in the back, and she sees the little stamp thing, and it's set up to say Pearl, and she reads the newspaper, and it says the wife of the dead guy is Pearl, and then you hear Mose say, oh, it's made out to Pearl, and she's like, you can tell on her face like, oh, I see what's going on. Okay. And it's just,
and that's how we as the audience learn about it too. Like you said, it's great filmmaking because it's showing us everything that we need to know without like having Mose sit down and be like, so I'm actually a con person who sells Bibles and blah, blah, you know?
Yeah, we're simultaneously learning what Moses' scam is, which is going to be a very important part of how they make money through a lot of the movie. But we're also learning so much about Addie because she's seeing all these bits of information, and she's able to, despite being 9 years old, able to put all of this together and instantly understand what it is that he's doing.
Yeah, she's kind of like Sherlock a little bit.
She'd make a great detective. I would love to see.
She really would.
Addie's later years in the set in the 1940s. She's become a lady detective.
Her and Imogene team up. I could see that. Her and Imogene reunite in like 15 years, and they become this power duo, and they just like, I don't know, do something cool. I don't know. I think Imogene's super cool, and I love that whole relationship that they have together, because, you know, it's really the only other time in this movie where we see Addie interacting with someone else that's close to her age, you know, and I think it's
someone
just
else
this
who's similar to her and that also has been forced to grow up very quickly too.
Yeah, it's like this interesting dynamic where they can both sit down and be like, yeah, we're both traveling with these older people that are just kind of like running around doing all these things, and we're just kind of here, and adults, man, they be dumb, right? You know, I just think it's a really just cool friendship that they have, and I like that they both get to have that little bit of, I don't know, just like carefree joy for a little bit with the two of them. I genuinely hope Imogene makes it back to her family, and that they live a long and happy life together. I don't know. But she's away from Trixie and back with her family, so hopefully that works out for the best regardless.
Yeah.
But
$30
what happens
richer?
to Trixie, though? That's the question. Now that Trixie no longer has Imogene, and like, does she get with the concierge guy? I don't think the
concierge guy is going to be good for very much.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
She seems like a survivor. I think
she could stand on the side of the road with her thumb up and get someone else in 5 minutes, I feel like.
Yeah. She'll ultimately be fine. It might be a little rough for a little while, but
she'll figure it out.
Again, sorry, I praised Madeline Kahn again so much, but just as again, it's really funny rewatching What's Up Doc, which is one of my favorite movies, and then watching Paper Moon in such quick succession, because Madeline Kahn and Ryan O'Neal play a couple in What's Up Doc, but their characters are so different from the ones that they play here. And yeah, it's just fun to see this different dynamic.
You should look up some reviews for this movie, because a lot of the reviews that I found for this movie compared it to What's Up Doc, and people, at least in the reviews that I found, they did not appreciate What's Up Doc that much.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, this movie is like, What's Up Doc is the lesser of these, because What's Up Doc is trying to pose to be something, whereas Paper Moon is actually the thing without trying to be the thing.
Interesting.
I don't know. I have not seen What's Up Doc, so I can't speak to that. But
wait, I haven't shown you What's Up Doc? How have we been friends for as long as we've been friends, and I have not made you watch it?
There's a lot of things that we've been friends that we haven't, like, I will still never get over Bright Star. I will never get over that.
Oh my
How
goodness.
did we know each other? So fun fact for the listener, Geneva and I have known each other for several years. We have watched many a movie together over the years. Me showing her movies, her showing me movies we've both seen, going to the theater, blah, 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 blah. I had to discover on my own.
I'm so ashamed.
Like a year and a half ago, this beautiful masterpiece of a film called Bright Star, directed by Jane Campion. I watched it, absolutely loved it, and called Geneva like immediately after and just told her, Geneva, have you seen this movie? It's incredible. It's so beautiful. And Geneva's like, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I was like, why did you not show me this? B, why did you not even tell me about it? Because I'd never heard of this movie. I only found it because I was doing a Jane Campion binge. And I was watching her whole filmography, and I'd never heard of it before. And then Geneva's like, yeah, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I said, well, we're no longer friends because you never told me about it.
And then we never spoke to each other again.
Never spoke again. But anyway, sometimes it happens where it's like, how has Geneva not shown me this? How have I not
I just feel
shown
like
her
I've done
that?
so many like have a bunch of friends over and we watch What's Up Doc type of nights. So I'm surprised that I
don't know.
never had one with you. Yeah.
Maybe you just didn't like
Well,
me.
we're going to do an episode on it sooner or later, so you'll get to see it.
Yeah. But anyway, look up some reviews for this movie and kind of see how people compare the two, because you might find it interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I mean, I could see What's Up Doc is very transparently an ode to the screwball comedies of the 1930s in its style. And I guess I could see people at the time being like, well, it's, trying to take on the style of another genre, whereas this thing is the thing it is, which I think is dumb because What's Up Doc is perfect, but this movie is also perfect. So
I can
we don't
neither
need
agree
to pit
nor
movies
disagree
against each other.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else to talk about with this movie in particular before we move on?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, cool. Well, so just to go into a little bit how this movie was received. So this film surprisingly has a lowish score on Metacritic, but also it doesn't have many reviews on there at all. I think it has 5 reviews. So
with a movie
whatever.
from this far back, it's kind of hard to get any sort of accurate reading off of Metacritic or Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, but for funsies, it has a 77 on Metacritic and a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. But like I said, I went through both of those websites. Neither of them had that many reviews. So there we go. As far as awards, so it had 4 Oscar nominations. So it was basically, so as many know, Tatum O'Neal was nominated for Best Actress in a Supporting Role, but also so was Madeline Kahn. And this movie
is so ridiculous, and I think this is still kind of a thing today, but it is so strange. Just because she's a child, she gets nominated for Best Supporting Actress, even though she's clearly the lead of the movie.
She is the lead. Yes, it should be. I don't know. I think it would be different now because we saw for Beasts of the Southern Wild.
That's true.
I forget her name.
Wallace. I forget how to pronounce her first name.
She was nominated for Best Actress, which we will be talking about that movie on this podcast at some point. I love that movie, and I know you haven't seen it.
I have not seen it.
But anyway, yes, she should have been nominated for lead. And I feel like if she had, she also would have won. But anyway, this movie was also nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound. And as we've said a million times, Tatum O'Neal did win the Best Actress in a Supporting Role Oscar.
Very well deserved.
Very well deserved. So as far as reviews go, like I said, I couldn't really find many that were actually from the year of 1973. So that leaves us with Roger Ebert because he's the only one that had a review from 1973 that I could find. So, so he says, by now everybody knows that Ryan O'Neal and his real life daughter Tatum play the man and the girl. But I wonder how many moviegoers will be prepared for the astonishing confidence and depth that Tatum brings to what's really the starring role. I'd heard about how good she was supposed to be, but I nevertheless expected a kind of clever cuteness like we get from Shirley Temple or young Elizabeth Taylor. Not at all. Tatum O'Neal creates a character out of thin air, makes us watch her every moment, and literally makes the movie work, in the sense that this key role had to be well played. I think that you and I kind of expressed lots of the different points made in that paragraph there throughout this podcast, so I think it's fair to say we both agree with what he said.
Yep, 100%.
So yeah, just to kind of close out. So with this movie, gosh, I mean, I guess the thing that really just sticks with me about this movie is I genuinely, I know this, there's so many great things about this movie, so it seems kind of ridiculous for this to be like the main thing that I'll say, but honestly, it genuinely is how I feel some sort of personal connection to this character of Addie. The first time I watched this movie, I genuinely just felt like my little 9-year-old child inside of me was seen. And I relate so much to her tough exterior, but soft interior, and coming across a certain way. But when people get to know her, they see the real side of her. Like, she's tough, but she's kind, but she's funny. She's all these different things. If you just take the time to, like, you know, get to know her a little bit, she's not as scary as you might think. And when I was younger, I was a lot more concerned about people finding me as scary than I am now, because now I just don't flip and care. That's not true, but that's not fully true. But yeah, so I don't know. I just really like how this movie portrays a child in a way that's not childish. They are seen as a human that is valuable, that has importance and relevance to the world, and has the ability to impact those around them, and also to take in the world around them and learn and grow from it. So yeah, Tatum O'Neal's performance is fantastic. She makes this movie. So yeah. How about you, Geneva?
Absolutely. Yeah, I could not agree more. It really is Tatum O'Neal. That is the takeaway, how good she is, how captivating, how compelling, and just the dynamic between her and her father in this movie. The relationship between Addie and Mose, and the tensions that are there, but also the softening, how they are kind of two lonely, broken people who have been kind of messed up by the world in certain ways, but are able to find this sense of security to a certain extent, and fulfillment and partnership and love in each other, and they're taking on these roles of taking care of each other and forming this partnership. And yeah, I really, really, really do love that father-daughter dynamic that is the heart of this movie. So yeah, great movie.
It's a good one. Father-daughter stories, man.
Mm-hmm. It was that good classic too. I was thinking the reluctant father figure and the plucky daughter figure that you see in, like, I know that people love that HBO The Last of Us show, but that's kind of also just a trope that you see through a lot of movies and TV shows across time. It's just it's a well-worn dynamic that just is great, you know. I always love to see it.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't watched The Last of Us, do it. It's good. So yeah. Okay, so that is our review of Paper Moon. Geneva, can you tell us what we will be talking about next week?
Yes, I am so excited about this. We are going to be covering one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, Amadeus from 1984.
Yeah, I thought this was your favorite of all time. No, just in the top 10?
My favorite of all time is Singing in the Rain.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, of course. I knew that. Okay. Yeah.
It's probably it's definitely top 5. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say, I feel like top 10 is low for this movie for you.
At least.
Yeah. So come prepared for that, everybody. I know that I will be prepared for perhaps a long discussion. I don't know. Probably. It's a long movie, and Geneva's going to have a lot to say. So
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, so much of it is just going to be me being like, oh, in that moment, oh, it's so good. Oh, in that line, oh, it's so good. So
yeah, if maybe after we both watch it, if you feel like this is a scenario where it's like we need to have a discussion about, like, how are we going to format this? For example, like with me with the Lord of the Rings, we're going to need to talk about how are we breaking this up, because we can't do all of it in one episode. So if you feel like we need to do that with Amadeus, just let me know.
All right, we'll do.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So stick around for that, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpickpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time.